Hello, Susie. Michael, Resiliency for
Hi,
Life.
Michael.
Good to see you today.
Really good to see you.
I'm in Toronto, and you are in...
I'm in Mont-Tremblant, Quebec right now. Not a bad place to be stuck. But
No.
I am here at this time of year.
Yes.
The pandemic right now.
Yes, so you and I are both in an upcoming book. And we both are big
Wonderful.
in resiliency. And so I wanted to ask you some questions about resilience and share with our viewers, especially that one that really needs us today, some of the things that you've learned about resiliency and some of the things you do to be more resilient. So I guess my first question to you is, when's the first time you knowingly did something that was resilient?
Well, I'll tell you the true story. I didn't really know that I was resilient. I just thought that these kind of things that have happened in my life happen to everybody. But at the celebration of life for our son who died of brain cancer 3 years ago, my best friend, because I'm a life coach, I help people through hard things, I help people through great things, and my best friend turned to me and she said, I really think you ought to be a resiliency coach. And I was like, I mean, really, truly, Mike, I was like, what are you talking about? And she said, you don't understand how you are, do you? And I was like, I don't know how you are, Michael. I was just like, this is just how people are. And she's like, no, Susie, not everybody goes through all the stuff that you've gone through and come back through it better, stronger, and with such joy. So I didn't really know that I was particularly resilient until people pointed it out to me. Was it like that for you?
Yeah, well, my parents, at a young age, my parents discovered that I was sensitive. So my dad didn't want to, I was really blessed that my father wasn't rough and tough. My dad didn't want me to toughen up in the traditional macho man 1950s, 60s way. He wanted me to see that that was good, but sometimes at the other end of the spectrum, you had to toughen up for your own sake. And so I remember having a splinter in my finger at 4 or 5. And for several days, I ate dinner with my finger out because it hurt. Okay, I need some attention on this. It hurt.
Right.
My father pulled me aside and said, son, I know it hurts. We've taken that out. Your mother's got the special cream to get rid of the infection. We've checked it twice a day. You're not going to lose the finger. It's a small thing on the scale of life. It's not a broken bone. It's not. So perspective. Now, I was only 4 or 5, so he was really calm and really quiet and gentle, but that was my baseline. First time I remember being told that it's good to be sensitive, but also there's a time and place for how much you express it and how much you choose to feel it. And it was like, choose.
The beginning of a reframe.
So that was really a wow. Because, at 4, I was obsessing. I hurt my finger. I hurt my finger. So my dad didn't mock me. He didn't make fun of the fact that it hurt. He really did to me, he got a 10 out of 10 as a parent. Because I had friends whose father would give them a punch and say, suck it up, buttercup. Well, now you want them to deny their feelings? No. Now, suck it up, buttercup, between a whole bunch of guys that are hanging out. Maybe it's appropriate, maybe it's not. But for a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, or 7-year-old, no, it's not. So when I had my concussion as a 6-year-old, then I realized that the other young guy who was 6 or 7 also had a frontal lobe injury. I wanted it quiet, and could you turn the lights out, and could you whisper? And he yelled, screamed, and shouted. His dad was out of country on business. His one set of grandparents were in Arizona at their home. The other set of grandparents were traveling, and this was the 60s. There was not a lot of airplane flights every day international. It took time.
Right.
You had the phone, you had the book. There was no credit cards for a lot of us. You had to write a check. It took time to go to A to B. You just didn't change a flight from the 10:05 one to the 10:39 one. There might not be another flight for 6 hours, even a couple of days. Dad was in
Right.
Anyways, he wanted these 5 people in his room now. And I never forgot thinking, wow, two of us, two boys, both have a sore head. And all he does is scream and shout nonstop except to catch a breath. My parents eventually got me transferred to my own room where I was allowed darkness and quietness. Because to this
Isn't that something? Because now we know that's what you needed, right?
yeah, well,
Dark,
also
quiet,
as an adult, I did a little research, and his response was very typical, as was mine. You get a little agitated to a lot agitated. He was agitated, and I wasn't shutting down, but I just wanted everybody to go away and be quiet.
Got it.
And x-rays in 60, 63 were not that accurate, so they kept checking my eyes every hour to see if a pupil was dilating. Did I have a bleed? They didn't want to do brain surgery unless they had to. And luckily, after 24 hours, the pupil stayed the same, so they decided to keep me in for a couple days. I was allowed, I think they let me sleep for 2 hours at a time. And eventually,
Yeah. And wake you up.
Hours, and then eventually I was sent home with my parents to check my eyes when I woke up, lunch, supper, bedtime. And it was like, I never forgot, and I couldn't believe that two people, similar experience, could be so radically different in their expression of what they're going through. Luckily, my parents taught me not to judge. Now, his screaming was annoying. I let that be very clear to my parents. His screaming is annoying, and it makes my head hurt. Nowadays, you just go to the safety store and get me noise-canceling earplugs. But in 60, 63, somewhere in there, the exact date of the accident is lost in the mists of time. We know it was spring because my vegetable garden was planted with my dad. We think it was the second one. So somewhere between 4 and 7, Dad planted a vegetable garden with me because children should know where their food comes from and how it happens.
So funny that you should say that, because when I was the same age, and we are the same age, my dad did the same thing. And I still remember we had this beautiful little garden. Yep. And I think that's where I learned to love gardening, which I have right out there.
Yeah. So with me, green beans, yellow beans, radishes, beets, lettuce, tomatoes. I think we're done, but it was a 6x4. And I'm a skinny kid. So at 4 or 5 or 6 with that clay soil trying to hoe, he said, you don't have to do perfectly. I just want you to start to appreciate that farmers work a lot harder than you and me, so we eat well.
That's an interesting lesson, isn't it? Because I believe that that's part of being resilient.
I agree. It's an appreciation of somebody grew the textiles. Somebody planted them. Somebody harvested them. Somebody cleaned them up. Somebody operated equipment. Somebody turned it into something. Somebody designed it. There's a whole process so I can wear this. And then, some poor retailer couldn't sell all of them, so I went in and got it at 60% off because I'm frugal. I'm not cheap, okay?
So you learned gratitude. I think that's an important piece.
I agree with you. And that's something that you talked about off camera, about seeing your dog with your spouse after visiting your son in the cancer ward, and that dog needing to go for a walk, and the dog helping restore you because the dog was full of love, but you also got movement and you're in nature. And
I have a funny little story about gratitude. It was more, so what happened with our car accident was my husband was driving 110 kilometers an hour, which was the speed limit. He says to me, I don't feel well, and he fainted. And the car went swerving down the 101 in Nova Scotia. I mean, I was just positive that we were going to die, positive. And then right before it hit in one of those concrete abutments, it turned, it flipped all the way over and stopped like that.
Wow.
I know. And he broke his neck. There wasn't supposedly anything wrong with me except for that I had a lot of trauma. Really, really trauma. So he's in the hospital, and the next day I had to go see the car because it had been towed away. So I walk in with my friend. This really is a good story. I walk in and I'm sobbing. I don't know really why he fainted, how bad his broken neck is, and my beautiful car is just a big mess. I'm sobbing, and this big burly guy, hate to label people, but he kind of did look like he ran a junkyard. He had a cigarette hanging out. He had big wool coat on, gruff beard, dirty hair, and he comes out and I'm sobbing. And then he goes like this, he's talking through his cigarette and he says, "Lady, you're one of the lucky ones." And Michael, I'm like indignant. Lucky, I'm thinking, lucky? Are you freaking kidding me? Lucky. He says, "Yep, you're in here. You're walking around." He says, "Every single day, people come in here. I see them," he says, "much worse because it could be their families coming in because you could be dead. They could have lost the whole family. Everybody could be dead." He goes, "Lady, you are one lucky lady."
And with hindsight, you probably agree.
Yeah, and in that moment, I was like, "There's nothing lucky about this." But he was right. And then, but my point is, it was really kind of when I really started, another way that I really started to realize the big piece that gratitude has in being resilient.
Absolutely, absolutely. My surgeon for my first cancer had gone to Europe. Can you imagine you go to school to be a surgeon for 7 or 9 years, and just as you graduate, you realize that Scandinavians have superseded everything you've been taught about surgery for bowel cancer patients, and there's a much better, more effective, long run, less expensive way. So he goes back to school for 6 more months. And I get to be his 100th and something surgery. You're told that there's nobody in the whole province of Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, one other person in Quebec. You have to go to Boston or Montreal to have one person with his skill set, and there's one guy in Toronto. And you go, and he's just down the road.
Wow.
So I'm in there scared out of my mind because after cancer surgery, they say it's spread to 4 locations. And I'm like, aren't I lucky? I got Dr. George P. Connick. And on top of that, Dr. George could have been a stand-up comic, except he forgot the punchline on occasion. But he would say, once he knew you were good with humor, what do you think of humor, Michael? I said, as long as there's no vulgarity and swearing with others, when there's just 2 of us, whatever you want, make me laugh, knock yourself out. He said the most outrageous things in a polite way. He would just infer. And I'd be there, 16-inch incision, down to 137 pounds, laughing and crying. And it's like, oh, I feel so loved. So, yeah, gratitude that he had the courage to keep going to school when a lot of people would have gone, no, the 1950s version of the surgery is good. And it's all back then, it's only $40,000 to $60,000 to the healthcare system to do it. This guy, it's a $90,000, but his way meant I might never have to come back in for more surgery. He was so advanced. And so he was working at a teaching hospital, teaching others. So he used to stand at the end of my bed. Good morning, Michael. We have some new experts in the making here. What do you think? I said, well, I have no Scottish heritage that I'm aware of, but I kind of like this. It's like an extra free opinion from each one of them. Because as much as you're really smart, they're smart too to get this far.
Yeah, really.
So it was the scariest time of my life was the first time in, because the cancer was in 4 locations. And yet I still had joy and fun because I had Dr. George P. K. Connick leading the charge with a wild, woolly, awesome sense of humor. And then I had all these medical students who saw that him and I had rapport. Mm-hmm. And Michael knows that he's very ill. Michael doesn't want to know statistics because in Michael's word, he's 0 or 100% in 5 years. So be careful what you say to him or he'll tell you what he thinks. Because I had fired my therapist because my therapist said, you're ill, your cancer spread, and you're too happy and you're in denial. No, I'm not in denial. I had a will made the day of my diagnosis so that my then spouse wouldn't have to probate a will from out of province.
So your therapist didn't understand that you could be like living in the present moment, really believe, be grateful, and therefore you could be happy at the same time. You knew that
scared out of your mind.
But the person didn't know, your therapist didn't get that.
He was clueless. He was well-intentioned, wasn't evil, but I found out a year later that he'd been fired from the church he worked in because he had a master's in divinity and a master's in psychology. And the church had released him from his contract, and the diocese that he was in, the faith he was in, wouldn't rehire him. So that tells you something. I'm not sure what it tells you, but that tells you something. So he then came to the hospital to inflict his rigid beliefs on me.
So he was like either or.
Yep. And so when you talk about gratitude and the junkyard guy telling you, lady, you're one of the lucky ones. I drove a tow truck briefly for 9 months part-time while I was going to high school, saving for college. And yeah, you are. In one scene, the person in the accident was in little pieces when we got there. So
yeah, it's just really.
There was nothing even to bury. Yeah, so.
Your therapist, one of the things I wanted to share with people that maybe will help people is, I think like your therapist was setting you up for black, white, either or. I think one of the key pieces is what you were demonstrating, which is with and. You were happy and you knew. You know, like we had a car accident and we also, because when you have and, I hope that's making sense.
Yes.
When you think like in terms of and, you know, I'm sick and, or our son is dying and.
Yes.
Or this, I remember one time we had a really bad ski accident and I was so upset because I kept saying the hill could have killed my husband, because it was true. It was caused by the ski hill. Could have killed my husband. And then I remembered and he's fine. And once you add that and,
yes,
it paves the path for room, right?
Yes. So what that therapist didn't understand. Yes, I have cancer. Yes, it's in 4 locations. Yes, I'm seriously ill. Yes, I'm fragile. I'm 137 pounds instead of 180. And I have faith. And I have a loving, supportive family. And I'm working for a corporation that's loving and supporting. And I'm on full leave until I'm healthy to come back. The VP had called me and said, don't rush. We've been here for 70 years. We'll still be here.
Great. You couldn't, that was excellent.
And Bill's wife was fighting a brain tumor, which I found out later, and did for 7 or 8 years. So he fully understood that when you're fighting, you're fighting. But I was loved. And when I did the and thing, like you, hey, it's Michael. I just got a diagnosis. I know we haven't talked for 6 months. Back in the old days when phone bills were really big news. I ran up a $200 and some odd phone bill in one evening. I'm going to be in the hospital. My mailing address is, I'd like something once a week, once a month, or every 3 months, something positive. Don't ask me how I'm doing. Send me a note, send me a picture. The garden's in, the flowers are out. I bought a new dress. Doesn't it look good? My husband bought a new tie. Doesn't he look smashing? Or, oh, we set a productivity record at work today. We did XYZ units better than usual. Just something about you. I want my frame of reference about you out there positive. So my mother's friend sent me a potted hyacinth in full glory. Several blossoms, big green leaves, but it was in a gardening hat. Came with gardening gloves. Purple for your spirituality, green for your growth, hat for your garden. And I get emotional every time I tell this. Gloves, because you're going to put your hands in the soil when you get out of there in a few months. Whoa, symbolism, hope. Wow, yeah, I know I could die in 6 days or 6 weeks or 6 months, but watch me.
That is just so lovely.
So like you, that and as a bridging statement, when it's based firmly in reality. So I call myself a realistic optimist. I know, but I got a will made, got a moving company, and the real estate agent all lined up, and it was all there in a file for my spouse. Dear, it's all here if you need it. They've got your number at home and work and volunteer, your parents in the same 3 spots, and my parents. So you're not alone. It's scary. I'm frightened out of my mind, but you're not alone. I've done the heavy lifting. The file's on a corkboard in my office. Now, I'm going to fight for my life. I got to go to the office. I got phone calls to make. I've called 197 people. I've asked for the following things. We're going to start getting mail. I worked for a social media company back in the day when everything was printed. It's a greeting card company. And so, as I put it, some of those cheapskates sent me the free samples. They didn't even go to the card shop in the company where they got 60% off. They used the free samples. I tease the hell out of a lot of them, but I'm so grateful. So when you use and statements, it might be one of the biggest lessons you can share with people. What's your and statement?
Yeah.
And so I'm really ill and I want your love and support in a positive manner.
Yeah, and currently, you know, I happen to have a lot of my life coaching clients right now have COVID. And, you know, they'll sit down, I have COVID, all these really lingering symptoms like not being able to raise your arm, not being able to think, not being able to breathe, pain settled in their back, and they'll say, I have COVID-19. And.
Yep. It is one of the most powerful things you can do for yourself.
Yeah.
I am 66. I went to the doctor about a foot issue a few years ago, my family doctor. Here's what I think it is, but you're the doctor. Off to the sonogram, off to the x-ray. Oh, the pain, I'd get out of bed to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, which happens when you've had all my surgeries. Some people say it happens with age. Well, it's been happening to me since 27. But anyways, I would fall to the floor. The pain was so excruciating. I had a joint that disconnected, pushing on the nerve. So that old saying, you're getting on my nerves, has a whole new meaning. I was getting on my own nerve. Anyways, so he agrees with me, but he's the family doctor. I'm going to send it to this foot doctor. What does he say? Oh, you're old. There's nothing I can do. This is while he's down there. I wanted to have a knee-jerk reaction and break his nose, but I decided to be more civilized and professional than he was. I said, really? So I left. But when I came back to see at the same clinic for another issue, because it's part of a large family, I made sure that my other doctor knew that this guy was unprofessional. He's not there anymore. Anyways, I then went and found a pain management clinic where it's two practitioners in your initial visit, and one is a movement expert. He's got a master's degree in bones and muscles and I forget his proper title, but anyways, they work with Olympic athletes and professional athletes. And anyways, and the other gentleman has 2 doctorates, one in chiropractic and one in Western medicine. So what's the joint? Here's what I think it is. Here's my memory stick with the x-ray and the sonogram. He said, were you the only one in the room except the person taking it? Yes. Not good enough. Here's what happens when you have joint issues. Somebody should be taking the x-ray, you're there, somebody else should be manipulating the joint to show people how it's damaged. If it's just resting, it might look perfect, and that's why insurance companies deny claims all the time. The x-ray, the sonogram looks perfect. Yeah.
Oh.
I was like, oh, he said, so I'm the nemesis of a couple of insurance companies that are famous for not wanting x-rays and sonograms or CT scans where the joint's manipulated to show the inflammation and because they just did you on the top, both cases. They should have been the top manipulated, the bottom manipulated, and it would have shown because he said, I can feel the inflammation. Anyways, they resolved it after a good diagnosis, a little exterior topical for a few days, and then they put in a foot insert, which I forget the proper name, and it pushes the joint into place. And
Yeah.
And so it's $300 plus consultation fee because it's not covered under provincial Medicare system, but that's fine. I don't expect the system to be perfect. It took care of all my cancer issues and diabetes issues. Who am I to complain about the smaller stuff? And I'm good.
Right.
And so between my massage therapist, my chiropractor, my podiatrist, and my family doctor, I got it taken care of. But if I didn't have the it hurts and I am worthy of a solution, I'd have believed the foot guy. And who am I to believe a 40-year-old who's a numbskull? I am not going to mention names. I don't want to ruin his life. But boy, was I steamed. And I'd like to think that him not being allowed to be in the clinic anymore was enough of a wake-up call that he's not that stupid ever again.
Yeah.
Because I was very clear to the other person I saw that I did this, I have a solution, and I even had my shoe undone so I could show him this is all it took. All he had to do was use his brain. Just because it's outside of his purview of expertise, all he has to do was like my family doctor saying, yep, I believe you, Michael. Let's send you an expert who should have a solution. Because I don't.
Yeah, of course. Because
Anyways,
totally.
Let this be a cautionary tale. When you're digging a garden and the soil is really rock hard, you don't jump on the pitchfork or the garden spade because it popped the joint out and it's never cooperated since. I stretched the tendons and it's never properly gone back in.
Okay, so I'll remember that the next time I get the urge to jump on my garden pitchfork.
Because it feels really fulfilling. You jump on normally and it sinks into the soil. You put your back into it and you're moving and you're getting things done. It's a real sensation.
I know.
But
I happen to like digging myself and getting
not when you're in your 50s and you use your old worn out running shoes for gardening. I now have some inexpensive, well-fitting work shoes that have a steel plate in the bottom and a steel toe for gardening.
Yeah, perfect.
And so when I help others, I put them on with the insert in and I can still help, but I don't jump. I just get on and I bounce. So I think that this is one of the biggest lessons, because you've expressed this different than anybody else in 37 years, is the and as a joiner. I talk about POVs, having more than one point of view. Mm-hmm. I have cancer and I still have a life. But you've said it another way to help me be more reflective for myself and others. So I am really grateful for that.
Well, I'm really grateful that we've had this time to talk. And I really think if one message could go out to anybody listening to this, it would be put and statements in. I have this and I have that.
I remember somebody saying that they felt stuck and in a business relationship issue. I said, so what's been good about the issue? Oh, we've made each other a lot of money, me for my company and them for their company. In fact, we helped them make so much, they took an extra 1 week vacation for the first time in 14 years. The spouse is ecstatic. I said, can you not thank them for that to see if you can fix this? Oh, I said, because you're both angry about something. Fair enough. But how about you thank them for over here, because you've worked collaboratively and cooperatively to make that happen, and you've increased their income, that he had so much profit last year that they took an extra week off, which the wife's been asking him to do for 9 years, because their kids, to quote the wife, aren't going to be here forever at home. We got to create some memories. Backyard barbecues only go so far. Of course, he was trying to save for their university and save to pay for their weddings, and he was doing a lot of awesome things, being logical. But his wife was saying,
right.
We need to get more space in here with them. Because other parents have swimming pools. Other parents go on holidays, even if they're just cheap cabins or camping. We never do. Anyways, so I think that's one of the most powerful things I've ever heard. So thank you.
I'm glad.
It's a healing statement too. I don't know if you see it that way, but I see it as a healing statement, because when I was ill, they said, but you could die. I said, I could physically die from cancer, but emotionally, spiritually, intellectually, socially, what if I left a legacy of happiness? Cancer physically beat me, but I said, cancer, read between the lines, rationally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, socially. I still won 6 ways out of 7.
Yeah, happiness.
Corny.
For me, it's love. When the car was rolling over, when I was telling you, and the car was, I thought that we were going to die. I had what I now know is a near-death experience.
Yes.
And the near-death experience, it went flashing over me, and it said, when you come to the end of your life, there's only one thing that matters, and that is love. How well you loved and how well you were loved. It came like it was this thing. I did, in fact, later find out that when people have near-death experiences, that kind of thing happens.
Yes.
So that's you're saying that, and I'm saying that as a really big part of being resilient, because when you carry that in your heart, it's so much bigger than whatever has happened, because love is huge, right?
I agree. And I met people in the cancer ward, because I was in off and on for 7 years in 2 hospitals. And I remember the one man saying, there's nothing left. They told me I've got liver cancer. It's like a forest fire raging in there with gasoline. I'm not going to live 3 weeks. So I told my wife and daughter, stay home, don't come back. I said, but they want to say goodbye. We did that once. And I felt so sad for him. And his wife actually came to visit me with the daughter, because he refused to see them anymore.
Sounds like he was afraid.
Oh, he was so scared. And so the lesson that I got from my parents was, as you just said, carry love in your heart And I remember a couple of nurses coming to see me off shift one day saying, Michael, we really liked meeting your parents because as much as you're really ill, they're still kind to us.
Yeah.
And I said, yes, because the others are fearful and they're angry. So they take it out at everybody in little snips. And she said, yeah, you get it. I said, so you were rich the day you were born.
Because they knew that, right?
And they both knew that. And I remember my mom saying, I married your father because in the 1940s when I met him, he wasn't a normal macho man. He knew that babies had two ends and a heart and a spirit to work with as well. Because he at 12 had babysit his niece. He was the youngest, his sister was the oldest. There was a big gap. So when she was in her 20s, she got married, had a kid within a couple of years, and he was 12, and he got to sit her a day a week, I think, because there was a hole in somebody's schedule. And my mom said, you know, that's a gift you can't buy.
Yeah, right.
That your father, my husband, to have that type of heart, you can't buy.
No.
Anyways, thank you for this gift of time.
Thank you for having me. I can't wait for our book to come out.
I know, but you and your bridging statement, I always talk about points of view and having more than one, which is I'm pleased and proud of, but you just gave me I'm having my best aha moment in a couple of days. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I guess I'll see you on Monday at the launch, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thanks.